Hey, it's Drybear. So I've been playing a good bit of Lost Ark. I looked on my Steam profile. I made the mistake of looking at it, and I saw that I've pushed past 1,800 hours on Steam alone, and I've also logged a couple hundred on the Russian version of the game and a little bit more than that on the Korean version of the game. So what I wanted to do was do more of a game review. I mean, pushing past 2,000 hours total in the game, I feel like I'm in a good spot to kind of give my thoughts on an MMO like this, things that I like, things that I don't like, things that I wish were different, and maybe that might be useful to you as someone who's either playing the game now or is deciding on whether they want to play the game or even keep going. So today we're going to dive into my thoughts on Lost Ark after 2,000 plus hours of grinding the game. So let's go. But first, let's thank today's video sponsor, Core. Core is every game you've ever wanted all at once. How is this possible, you ask? That's because Core is a metaverse of free games to play and worlds to explore, all created by the community. You can play over 50,000 games in a crazy amount of genres. If you love the endless possibilities that custom games provide, then Core is where it's at. Play from the growing library of games within Core, or channel your inner game developer and create your own experience to share with others. The tools for creation are so easy that literally anyone can do it. And using the avatar designer allows you to be anyone you want within the metaverse. If you love grinding and getting stronger in Lost Ark, then you should check out Primal World within Core. It's a multiplayer RPG where you explore a newly discovered planet with your friends. You'll fight against the Ancients, which are these mysterious mechanical beings, complete puzzles and quests, and gather materials to upgrade your equipment. What surprised me about Primal World is how varied the gear and weapons can be when you mix and match them. Plus, you can ride around on a hoverboard, which is always worth it. Use the links in the description to play Primal World by downloading Core for free, and using my links lets Core know I sent you, which helps me out too. There's a lot to get in here, as the depth of this game is absolutely extensive, and it's kind of expected for MMOs to be this massive. So I'm gonna try and keep each point short so they keep the video short, so a little more digestible. But let's start with what I think is easily one of the most marketable aspects about Lost Ark, the combat. I think whether you are a fan of the game or not, it's very hard to argue against the quality of delivery in the combat for Lost Ark. The game runs exceptionally well for being on Unreal Engine. It feels good. The combat looks great. It sounds great. The audio design is just so guttural and visceral, and it feels good every time you hit and destroy mobs. The way they display the numbers, the way the abilities look and feel, the awakening ultimate abilities, all of it comes together to be one of the best combat experiences that you can find right now on any PC game out there, which is exceptional because usually the big drawing point for MMOs and RPGs like this is the grind aspect, right? It's the encounters, the PvP, the class design, and the things that make you want to get stronger and progress further in the game that are usually what keep you in the game. And oftentimes people will put up with weaker deliveries of combat and combat feel because they care more about the systems that they're engaging with. And on top of that, I think Lost Ark has some of the most unique and engaging class designs of any game that I've played in recent memory. They do have some class archetypes that are a little more typical that you would see in many games, but they also have a lot of daring class designs that are super unique and interesting. And I think one of the drawing points for this game on top of the combat is that there's gonna be a class for most people, and there's gonna be a class that also just kind of wows you. You look at it and say, wow, I kind of want to try that. That looks interesting to me, and it looks like it would be a lot of fun to play it. And part of what allows Lost Ark to have these unique character designs is the fact that they are not a traditional, Triforce, trifecta role system, especially in the PvE. You don't have traditional roles like tank, DPS, and healer. In fact, most people, as they play, are going to be playing as DPS, and the counters are designed in such a way that you are responsible for yourself. You have to bring your own consumables, Most of the mechanics are dodgeable in most of the encounters. As you go further along into later stages, there are more encounters that have tick damage or chip damage that's unavoidable, but that does mean that you just bring a support class. So there are currently in the West 2 support classes. In Korea, there's a third with the artist that you can bring that's primarily for damage amp. They give you big, huge damage buffs that allow you to kind of keep yourself bursting heavy, but they also provide support through damage reduction and healing. So most groups in competitive settings for, you know, cutting edge content will have a support class in it, but the game is flexible for, you know, content that you outgear or outscale. You don't need to have a support in that group. And obviously there's no tanks in the game. Aggro is completely random. So it puts a lot of agency on each player to dodge mechanics, be in the right place at the right time, and then try to take as little damage as physically possible. Now, a quick note on the support class. I think it is a pro to say that this game is flexible in its team comps, and that does allow it to have very unique classes. There is an issue that I think that any game falls into. There's going to be a difference between what you're intending and what flexibility you allow for, and what ends up being the actual, I wouldn't even call it meta. I feel like meta is just the way the game is played. I think that there is a heavy reliance on having support classes in the game for most content, other than the content that you just completely outgear and you know, damage isn't really, taking damage isn't something that you care about. And I feel like it's an issue that hasn't really been properly addressed yet in Lost Ark, which is the lack of support classes in the game. Right now in the West, we have 18 classes released. 2 of those are support, which means that, you know, any content you're doing in PvE, PvP, you can go without a support, but PvE, you need to have 1 support player in parties of 4, and then another support player for the raids of 8, so 2 in 8, which means that 25% of your PvE groups are needing a support, but, you know, only 2 out of 18 classes are support. So it creates this weird dynamic where you can't actually build the groups as easily as you want, and oftentimes, especially in the West, we're having issues where we can't make groups and we're sitting around waiting long periods of time for a support player to come along and join the group so that we can do the content as it was intended. And this feeds itself into another pro for the game that I really enjoy, in that it is very heavily in favor of alts. So if you like having alternate characters, you're not someone who likes to play one class. I am an altaholic, so this game fits me perfectly because I love to have one of every class and play everything and experience everything. And this game is very much in favor of that. So let's go into why it's so alt friendly and so alt centric, and some of the benefits and downsides of being in that strategy. The first of which is arguably the most important, is that you will get materials that allow you to upgrade your equipment that are tradable on all characters. So activities that you do, chaos dungeons, guardian raids, even raids like that, they will drop resources that you can use to make your gear stronger, raise your eye level, and unlock new content that's tradable. So for every character that you play in your roster, besides your main character, can earn resources for your main character to progress it, or can be used for anything. So again, every character after the first has significant value added to your account. The next thing is they do something that I'm surprised more games don't do nowadays, which is having a shared resource pool for all the characters on one server. So they call all the characters on one server your roster. So all these are your roster characters. It's like a group of superheroes, right? It's a whole roster, a whole team, and they share resources. So your gold, which is your soft currency in game, they use to buy from vendors, silver, which is used for different elements, and then, you know, your pirate coins, things like that, are all shared across your characters on that server. And on top of that, so are your storage items, which are items that are, you know, general purpose. So life skilling, when you're collecting things to make potions or to craft or repair, hunting, fishing, all of these are stored in a roster-wide storage resource. So if you're an avid MMO player, you're used to having to transfer gold or gil or whatever between characters. because one may have one more than the other, but in this game it's all shared, so you can just very easily grind as a group, and it kind of keeps that focus on your entire roster rather than just one character, because everything's shared. Anything you do on one character, more often than not, will help progress other characters on that roster, which does help the support issue, because it means that it encourages more people to have at least one support, if not two, on their roster, so they can play it regularly, and it helps fill those groups, helps drive interest into the support classes. I'd be curious to ask Smilegate why they haven't released more support classes. It won't solve the issue, because there's just a desire to play DPS. Everyone always wants to play DPS. It'll be underrepresented no matter what. But I'm curious as to what metrics they have that show that supports being this underrepresented in the total kit design, the total class design, archetype hierarchy, what impact that has on the game, and why there are so few. The raid designs and the dungeon designs are unique, and I think it's partly because it's a developer, from a different area in the world. There's going to be different cultures, things that they perceive in games are going to be a little bit different, and how they develop and release a game is going to be a little bit different. And one of the things that I really love about Lost Ark is that the PvE encounters are unafraid of having high difficulty walls. There are plenty of high difficulty MMOs out there. You can do mythic rating, or high level mythic plus in WoW. You can do savage, very high difficulty in Final Fantasy, and that's true of most MMOs. Some struggle to have high difficulty. You can even argue that the smaller groups like Destiny, things like that, have high difficulty, but I think that the difficulty walls in Lost Ark are very unforgiving in ways that most games are afraid to employ. And that's things like, in a group of 8, one person makes one mistake in a 10-minute fight and it kills everyone. And there's just no forgiveness there. There's definitely a lot of checks there. Now, I would probably put the content for raiding and for dungeons on a spectrum between extreme discipline and high reliance on reactivity and being dynamic in the moment-to-moment decisions. I would put a game like Final Fantasy XIV with Savage Raids on the far side of high discipline. Final Fantasy XIV encounters, mostly in my experience, have all been relatively expected, right? You're not gonna get a crazy amount of surprises or randomness in the Final Fantasy XIV encounters. Some of them do have RNG, but for the most part, what's going to happen. The challenge is being able to do it properly and do it well on the time that you need to do it. So it's a different mentality, and that's super fun and super engaging. And I would put Lost Ark on the far other end of the spectrum of it being highly dynamic. This game is very RNG in its encounters. First of all, aggro is random, so who the boss will target changes constantly. It's random, you can't control it. There are 2 classes in the game that can taunt and pull aggro, but it's only for a very brief moment, and the next time it's just all over the place. So the boss could target anyone, it could change and attack anyone, and most of their patterns are random as well. So they'll trigger mechanics that you have to react to on the fly. Some encounters have scripted aspects to it, and then they have RNG aspects as well. But there is, in this game more than most MMOs, a high degree of reaction required from you as a player to realize, okay, now they're in this spot, they're going to do this, they suddenly did this, I didn't expect that, now I have to do something new, which I think is really fun and different. And that adds to the difficulty of the game, which brings about a different sort of dopamine hit. It's more like, when Dark Souls games first started coming out, they wanted them to be extremely difficult, and then conquering them is where you got the fun. And it was frustrating and difficult and painful, but as you got through it and fully conquered it, you got that dopamine hit from finishing it. And I think that this plays really well into the alt-centric nature of the game, because it means that you're going to want to play your whole roster through the same content. So you play, you do your raid encounter on your main, and then you're going to want to work your characters up so that you end up doing the same encounter on all your characters with different classes. But it means that the people that conquer it can then go back and help other people learn it, because they have to do it more than once. It's not like, you know, you're at a cutting edge guild where you get to the point where you finish the content and then you log off. You finish the content on the hardest difficulty, but then you want your other characters to get through it, which helps more groups be forming all the time. And it also means that people are forming people with higher experience. Say they get, you know, they clear hard mode or they clear Inferno. They're going to then want to do the normal and easier difficulties on their other characters that aren't quite as progressed, even though they themselves have the experience, which I think helps teach other players that may want to come in, you know, and they're grouping with people that may be making less mistakes because they know the encounter, and it allows them to learn and get involved with the raid for the first time. There's also a high focus on individual skill level with combat that shows off your personal performance. There's definitely moments in other games where you can really be the star shine, but I think that there are a lot of moments in Lost Ark encounters that feel like you can shine. First of all, counters are a big one. Encounters are just like a parry. A boss that you're fighting will glow blue and then do some kind of forward attack. And every class in the game has an ability that can counter. If you stand in front of the boss, which in most cases is standing directly in the path of their attack, and you time your counter to hit while they're still flashing blue, it'll be a successful counter. You'll momentarily stun the boss and knock them down, and it'll announce to everyone in the party who got the counter, which I think is really cool. And there are times where, you know, you're the only one in the corner where the boss is facing, and the boss is about to escape or fire some massive attack, and you can step in front of it, throw out the counter the boss, and you feel really good about it. There's plenty of these kinds of moments in Lost Ark that really help you stand out as a player, which is always fun. And overall, I think anyone who's a fan of MMOs and RPGs is going to have a great time with the end game PvE content for Lost Ark. But there are some cons to the core PvE gameplay. The first is rather minor, and it's, you know, most games suffer from this. I think there's just there could be better tells on what a boss or monster is going to do. And there's also, I think, a lack of consistency in the hit range for attacks. I think the telegraphs that are there, sometimes they line up well and sometimes they don't. There could be hitboxes that are way outside of their indicators. But like I said, I think this is pretty minor. A lot of MMOs have this problem. I think the fixed perspective and, you know, UE3 for Lost Ark probably adds this to this. Just depth perception in general can make it hard to read. But I think people adjust to this over time. And the more you face the same encounter, the more you learn how wide you have to go away from the indicators that may or may not be accurate. And the next issue that I see with the game is that there is a large amount of legacy content since the game has existed for several years now. The initial content, so the game is split up into tiers, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 3 is the current content, and there's a lot of it. But to get there, you have to get your first character through tier 1 and tier 2. And I think that tier 1 and tier 2 content, as many people would agree, are very lacking. They're difficult to play through. The difficulty doesn't feel justified in some cases, just kind of random, or it feels like it's a random spike that feels unfair or just unfun. And you kind of have to slog your way through it. I don't think this is too big of a deal because all MMOs have a slog part where it's just like get through it and get to the end. But I think that Lost Arks can be pretty grindy and painful with the encounter design that they had in the earlier stages of the game. Now let's talk about power scaling and character development. There is a lot going on with one character in this game. So they have several systems. Obviously, there's going to be gear. So there's accessories, ability stones, and the gear that you wear. Those can also be set bonuses, so they give you extra power. But I think one of the challenging aspects, it's both a positive in that once you master these systems and you understand them, it's really fun to build your character. And, there can be a lot of characters that are built differently. There's obviously a meta, but there's variations in that build that allow you to flex kind of on your own individual play style. But the downside, I think, with these customization systems for the game is that they're poorly explained. So let me just walk through quickly all the different systems that you can use to build your character. So you have gear that can have set bonuses on it. And then you have a character build, which is your abilities. These abilities can have modifiers like a talent tree here on each ability, and they all have different effects. And then you can equip onto those abilities runes that have an additional effect. You can increase the skill points on the abilities, which unlock different talent trees. And each one of them, you know, it depends on how many you can have on your bar, but you can have a whole bunch of them listed here. And these talent trees that you have on each ability, the effect of these, they're called tripods. You can scale these talents up to be stronger and stronger, and those currently come from your gear. So you can actually have skill tree bonuses on your gear that affect your skills in very strong ways, which makes your character stronger. You have a stat distribution of combat stats that can have various effects on how your character plays. And they also have a Monster Hunter style system where you can get buffs, and then based on how much you equip of that buff, it gives you varying benefits. These are, you know, segmented into threes. So if you get level 1, level 2, level 3 of one of these bonuses, you can make it stronger and stronger, and then you have an allotment of skills, which essentially is another skill build that you get from your gear. Based on how many points you get and unlock, you can have those equipped to your character. All of these can be significantly impactful on how your character plays and how strong it is. So you have not only combat stats, but also you're getting a collection of these skill benefits listed on your gear that put together. On top of that, you will also get gems. These gems that all have a different ability. You can get a cooldown gem or a damage gem, and you can level them up to make them stronger and choose what abilities they go on. There's 11 slots for these gems right now, so you're grinding to get those stronger. Then on top of that, there's card systems and card selections. These cards you collect as a collectible, but when you put them together into a card deck for your character, it can give you, you know, damage bonuses, crit bonuses. It's a big part of making your character stronger is also your cards. And each of these systems by itself, I think, you know, generally gear is pretty straightforward. I think the Monster Hunter style skill building is not something you commonly see in RPGs. It's in every Monster Hunter game, but if you've ever played a Monster Hunter game on how you get this, it might be kind of surprising. You level these up by collecting points. But it's another, you know, you have a skill tree based on skill points. It also has a skill tree inside of it. It also has modifiers that you can collect and place onto it freeform, right? So you have all of these that you can choose from that have different selections and benefits to that character. Then you have these engraving bonuses that can have different effects to your character. You have set bonuses, and then you can scale up your, you know, your skill tree. Then you have gems and cards. Like there's a bunch going on, which can be overwhelming for players that are first coming in. It's a pro once you get used to it, but I think that most of these systems, as a new player onboarding into the game, your new player experience, I think, is rather weak, and it's something that can be very overwhelming. And I'm sure there are many players that got to this point and ended up leaving the game because they couldn't get their head around it, or, you know, they just didn't want to bother. We talked about the benefits and pros of having an alt-centric mentality for the game, but I think there is an inherent downside with such a high focus on having multiple characters in your roster. And I think it would be a poor review if I didn't talk about it myself. And that's that there is just a wall that you will hit on your main character. So if you're someone who plays Lost Ark, you play MMOs, and you prefer to have a main character that you spend all of your time on and you have tons of stuff to do, I think one of the cons for Lost Ark is that you will hit a wall on your main character where you just simply cannot progress. If you're someone who only plays one character, you may only have a couple days worth of content each week. Once you finally get to endgame and you're on, re-clearing everything. And what's meant to be the case is that you play your main, you finish all your weeklies, you play your main, you do your dailies, but then you're progressing your roster, you're playing other characters. Some people will make multiples of the same class, and then just kind of share gear and just, you know, get more dailies and weeklies done so they can progress their main character. And most people will just have multiple characters. But the downside of being so alt-centric in Lost Ark is that you will run out of things to do on your main character. And if that's all you're doing, you may just log off, which is kind of cool if you just, you want to play other games or have time for other things. But as far as the character progression for one character goes, it can feel rather limited compared to other MMOs and RPGs. Which leads perfectly into the next topic, which is the amount of content in the game. You obviously will run out of core progression content for one character to progress and get stronger. But I think, one of the double-edged swords for Lost Ark is that there is an overwhelming amount of content in the game. It is actually quite difficult to really do everything. You're going to have a large amount of content to do for singular progression, and then you can do progression for alternate characters. There's also a significant amount of horizontal or secondary progression that you can get. So this screen here is the collectible screen. This is something that you do once, but it is, it's something that does take a while. So you'll go through and collect all of these. There's, things you can collect from the islands in the open world. You can get Giant's Hearts, Omnium Stars, Masterpieces, Makoko Seeds, Igneous Tokens, World Seeds, and then bounties as well. So you're going through all of these and you're collecting all of these things, and they give you pretty big benefits, right? They give you runes for your skills, skill points, and all kinds of other unlocks. And these can take, years for you to complete for the average player, and take a long time to grind out. So, it can be difficult to budget your time to do your progression activities, as well as your secondary and tertiary activities, as well as, you have constant events going on. You have a compass in the top, you have a stopwatch in the top left corner that shows you what's coming up, sailing events. There's tons of stuff going on a rotating schedule that you may or may not want to be involved in. But it can be quite overwhelming with how much stuff there is to do. And you realize right away you can't do it all, and you're not sure which to prioritize, which can be great if you're someone that sticks with the game. But again, as a new player, you come in and you look at it and you're just, okay, I need to do all of this and all of that and all of that. But first I need to do this, and it can just really put a strain on you. And honestly, the grind is nonstop. And that's, I think, actually probably more of a con than anything, in that it is actually quite difficult to take time off from Lost Ark, because the grind is never ending. Getting to the highest eye level takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, and it's nonstop. You want to be doing your dailies every day. You want to be doing your weeklies every week. And the idea of taking a couple weeks off of Lost Ark can be quite painful for most players. They'll realize how much they're losing. And it's not like you can jump in, do a couple raids and log off. Like there's a lot that you need upkeep wise to keep your characters going. Now I am working on a video going over the lazy man's guide to Lost Ark for people that are more time restricted, how to get the most out of your time and how to play with very minimal hours each week so that you can kind of get the most out of it. But there is definitely that feeling of like, I need to be doing everything all the time as frequently as possible. Otherwise I'm going to fall behind, or my character's not going to get there. It can be a bit of a challenge for players to come in with minimal time and get a lot out of the game if they're not aware of how everything works. Now, I really enjoy the PvP in Lost Ark, but it is quite different. I think if you try to compare it to arenas or battlegrounds from other games, it's not going to be quite the same. So the first thing to worry about is in open world PvP, this game is, you can pay to progress your character. I would put it in a character, I mean, you can put in real money and then make your character stronger, which means that in open world, someone who has considered a whale, right, someone who spends a large amount of money on the game is going to be significantly stronger than you and will kill you in world PvP. But, in a pay-to-win game like this, I think that they do a really good job of isolating that so that it doesn't really impact the average casual player. Most of the content that you're going to do, you'll either benefit from having whales on your team, or it's going to be equalized. So the arenas in this game are 3 versus 3, and they are fully equalized. You go in with a character build. Everyone has the same amount of stats. Everyone has the same, bonuses. There's no engravings. There's no runes or anything like that. It's not kind of messing around. It's just, here's your build. You go in, it's equalized. Everyone has the same, and you get to play competitively, which I think is really cool. One of the things that I think that is a little more polarizing about PvP in this game is it, in my perspective, plays more like a fighting game than it does a traditional RPG or MMO in PvP combat. So if you're someone who's used to WoW arenas where you're putting your comp together and you're trying to whittle someone down or corner them to hit them at the right moment, or you're countering their abilities, it's not going to play like that in this game. It plays more like a fighting game in that there's a lot of CC, there's a lot of stagger and disruption, and in fighting games, a lot of them, it's more about not getting caught up in the juggle than it is about being able to react and trade blows like a boxing match where you take a hit, they take a hit, you take a hit. It's more positioning based, so it's more competitive in that way, which feels really good. But I think that people that come in with an MMO mindset, traditional MMO mindset, may not gravitate towards the PvP for that reason. And since they have the equalized system in the game, it's nice because there are PvE encounters. You can fight guardians, you can fight queue up for dungeons that are equalized, and there's also, for the end game raids, which are the Legion commanders, they have equalized versions called Inferno mode in the west or Hell mode in other regions, where everyone has equal stats just like you would in PvP, and it's a high difficulty of fighting the boss at equal strength. You can't outgear him, and everything's super tough. So it's nice that that system exists, and it's a cool little challenge mode across the board, PvE and PvP, that helps things kind of balance out. Next, let's dive into one of the more talked about aspects of the game, the marketplace, the pay to win aspects, and the ability to spend money for character power. The market system in this game, I think, has a lot of pros and a lot of cons, so let's go through each of them. Firstly, you can jump into the game and there's two hard currencies. There is well, I guess this would be like a medium hard soft currency. There's the hard currency, which is royal crystals. You can buy this for real money based on your region and whatever currency you have. And then you can use that, this yellow gradient crystal to buy things in the game. But they blur the line of gameplay and cosmetics more than most games. It is a Korean MMO at its heart, so it will do that. And then there's this in-between currency, which isn't a true soft currency, and it's these blue crystals. So at any point, you can go into the game and buy a hard currency, the royal crystals, and then you can go to this currency exchange, which is, it's always changing market. You can put bids up to buy gold, which is the in-game soft currency. You can buy the currency in the game directly. And then you can also use the in-game soft currency to buy the in-between, the blue crystals here. So the blue crystals are a limited, hard currency that you can use. It does allow you to buy some things in the store, right? Like, so you can see here, this skin and a duplicate of it are listed here. One has the royal crystal price, one has the blue crystal price. So there are downsides to this, but there's also pros, which means that if you have in-game gold, you can convert that gold into a interim medium currency and then buy some things in the shop with it, which is nice, which means that if you're just playing the game, grinding and getting gold, you can then buy skins, and you can unlock some things in the shop, which is pretty cool. On top of that, they do make it so the things that you can buy, a lot of these things, specifically the skins and the mounts and the pets and all that stuff, when you're looking at these things, if you buy them for real money, more often than not, they will be actually tradable, which means that you can come into the in-game auction house and go to skins, and then you can sell them. So it creates this actual economy for, when a new skin comes out. It's like fashion. New fashion is always worth more than old fashion. No one wants to be out of style. So it actually does drive a skin trade, its own market, on having the prices for these things to go up and down. And then you can, again, if you're someone who just plays free to play, you can play the game, farm soft currency, like the in-game currency, and then buy skins off the auction house with that gold that you have without ever having to spend money, courtesy of the people that are spending money. So it kind of creates this nice in-between where you're, we're in the middle of a summer event, so you're gonna see a lot of bikinis in here and a lot of extra bits, which I think is, it's just part of it. But that aspect has a nice benefit to free-to-play players, but it does kind of blur that line, and obviously that, you can, as a person, I think this kind of puts to bed the argument that Lost Ark is not pay to win. I think it is pay to win and pay to progress. I think the argument is more around what do you define as win? Because I can come in here if I have the funds and buy gold that I could use to make my character stronger. And on top of that, I can go to like shops like this and buy upgrade materials that will make my character stronger. So by opening up that tradable aspect means that players that are on, you know, your minnows, your free to play, and your sharks that may not spend as much, they can actually interact with the players that are spending more than them by, you know, buying gold, and gold is always a valuable resource. And to be honest with you, you know, I've done game design and system design before. Keeping something like this in a way that works the way that it does is actually quite impressive. So they're able to kind of balance this, you know, free open market between spenders and in-game grinders, people that have more time and less money, or the people that have more time or more money and less time. And those two players can interact a lot by, you know, farming things up or buying things and having that aspect, which is nice. I mean, there's definitely situations where, you know, if there's a item that you want to get in another MMO that's on the shop, but you can't get it, you won't really have a way to farm it or anything like that. You either pay or you don't. If you don't have the money, then you're not gonna be able to get it. And since Smilegate is a business, they do want to drive interest in this. So it is a exponential grind to keep going higher and higher. So to progress faster, it is faster to just spend and then unlock the things that you need for your character using that currency. It's very pay for progress. You can get to the same places that everyone else does if you have a lot of time or you have a lot of patience, but you can pay to progress as well. And one system that gets talked a lot about is the Fion system. So Fions are another currency type in the game that are used to put, I like to think of it as a gold tax on very valuable items. So if you go to, you know, current tier accessories, and then you try to buy them, it'll say that you have a required Fion cost in addition, which is these blue currency here, to the gold. So you are actually having to double pay for that. And the more valuable the item, the more it's going to require, the higher quality, things like that. And then also the skins that are tradable, if they've been traded once already and you try to buy them, they will require an additional Fion cost as well. Which, you know, since you can convert your gold into blue crystals and then use those blue crystals to go to the shop and buy Fions, you can think of Fions as a gold tax. But it is something that, you know, I would love to sit down and figure out, you know, the value of having the Fions. It seems like it helps keep the system balanced because it'll have a minimum price for anything on the auction house, right? Even if I put a really valuable item up on the auction house for 1 gold to buy, if it requires 25 Fions, which say that, you know, in conversion is 500 gold, even if I put it up for 1, there's a minimum value of that item based on the rarity and whatever, you know, decisions that they make on the game design side to put it up for that price. And I've seen many people argue against the Fion system. I can definitely see the game existing without it. And like I said, I'd love to hear from them what they think about the Fion system and what problems that it solves for them. I can see some that it solves and I can see some that it creates. And I think probably the biggest thing that people react to is just the fact that it's another currency you have to get, and maybe you have the gold that you want, and then you go to the auction house and you try to buy something, and when you try to buy it, you're out of Fions, so you need to go buy Fions, but you don't have the gold for that. So I think there's just definitely not that many games that have this kind of open market currency exchange, so that you go here and you have to buy another currency using your currency. It's something that a lot of people I think have gripes with, but over time I think you adjust to it. And it does have some benefits in setting a floor for the price of items traded on the auction house. And that's the core. To keep the video, it's already long enough as it is. But those are the main points I wanted to discuss on Lost Ark. If there's anything that you want me to go in further detail for, let me know in the comments down below. And additionally, if there's anything that I didn't cover that you wanted me to talk about, then let me know as well. I think it's hard to review a game of this size because there's so much going on, but I wanted to kind of just, as a milestone, as I'm crossing 2,000 hours west, and then I already have, you know, several hundred in Russia and in Korea. I just wanted to put my thoughts down of, you know, on the other side of the game, what you can expect and what I think about it. So thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, you can find me live or down in the comments. Use the links in the description to play Primal World by downloading Core for free, and using my links lets Core know I sent you, which helps me out too. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.